On the night of our 25th anniversary, I slipped into the same silver gown I had worn on our wedding day. I wanted the evening to feel special, almost like a reminder of who we used to be. But when Daniel walked into the restaurant, I instantly felt something heavy in my chest. He barely looked at me. He didn't smile. He didn't even compliment the dress he once couldn't stop staring at. Instead, he sat down with the kind of sigh that made it clear he didn't want to be there. I tried to keep the conversation warm, hoping the tension would fade. I talked about memories, about how far we had come, about the plans I thought we still shared. But he wasn't listening. His eyes kept drifting, and his fingers tapped the table as if he was waiting for something. I told myself maybe work had stressed him out again, maybe he needed time to relax. I kept trying to save the night, even though it already felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Then, without warning, he pulled a large envelope from his coat and pushed it toward me. His face didn't change. His voice didn't shake. He simply told me to open it. When I slid the papers out and realized what they were, the room around me seemed to disappear. Divorce papers. On our 25th anniversary. I stared at him, hoping for some sign of regret, some sign that this wasn't what it looked like, but all he did was tell me to sign them before dessert arrived. He acted as if this was a business transaction, not the end of a life we built together. I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and I could barely breathe. All the effort I had put into making the night meaningful suddenly felt foolish. I kept thinking back to the way he had been distant these past months, the late nights, the unexplained tiredness, the sudden irritation over small things. I had convinced myself it was just stress, that it was a phase, that we would reconnect with a little time and tenderness. But in that moment, I realized he had been pulling away for far longer than I wanted to believe. Still, I held myself together. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't question him, not there, not in front of people who might be watching. I simply put the papers back into the envelope and placed it on the table. My hands were shaking, but I forced a calm expression. I wasn't going to fall apart in front of him. Not after everything I had given to this marriage. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I barely tasted the food, barely heard anything he said. My mind kept replaying the moment he pushed that envelope toward me, cold, emotionless, rehearsed. It was so clear he had chosen this night on purpose. A night that meant something to me. A night I had hoped would bring us closer. Instead, it revealed a truth I wasn't ready for. When we finally stepped outside, the air felt sharper than usual. He walked ahead, leaving me to trail behind in the dress that once symbolized love, but now felt like a costume from a life that no longer existed. I knew nothing would ever be the same after that night. And deep down, I felt that what happened next would hurt even more than the papers he made me hold. When Daniel finally walked into the restaurant, it was already 20 minutes past the time we were supposed to meet. I had been sitting there alone, pretending to study the menu so people wouldn't notice how anxious I felt. When I saw him, a small part of me hoped he would smile or apologize or show even the slightest warmth. But he didn't. He just nodded at me like he was meeting an acquaintance, not his wife of 25 years. He sat down with a tired, irritated look, as if the dinner was something he had been forced into. He didn't say I looked nice. He didn't mention the dress he once loved. He didn't even ask how long I had been waiting. Instead, he adjusted his sleeve, checked his watch, and muttered something about traffic. I tried to ignore the coldness in his voice, hoping that maybe he just had a long day. I told him I was glad he made it, keeping my tone light, but he didn't respond. He only picked up the menu and scanned it without interest. I tried starting small conversations, asking about work, mentioning the restaurant decor, even bringing up a memory from our early years. Each time, he gave short answers or none at all. He didn't look at me when I spoke. His eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, then back to his watch. It felt like he was waiting for someone, or waiting for the night to end. The more he acted distant, the heavier the air between us felt. I reminded myself that marriages go through hard phases, and maybe he just needed time to warm up. I tried complimenting him, tried making jokes, tried anything to lift the tension, but he didn't respond the way he used to. His face stayed stiff, his shoulders tight, and his attention disconnected from me. The man sitting across from me felt like a stranger wearing my husband's clothes. The waiter came to take our order, and even then, Daniel's tone was clipped and impatient. He tapped his fingers on the table as the waiter talked, his eyes flicking down to his watch again. It was as if every minute spent at that table made him more restless. I could feel frustration building inside him, but I didn't know why. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't said anything wrong. Yet everything about him made me feel like I was an inconvenience. I kept reminding myself to breathe and stay calm. I held on to the hope that maybe, after the food arrived, we could ease back into the comfortable rhythm we once had. Maybe the mood would shift if we just got through the awkward start. I tried to smile, tried to look hopeful, tried to keep the evening from falling apart completely. But deep down, I already knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just a bad day or a stressful week. It was something bigger, something he didn't want to say. Each glance at his watch felt like a countdown I didn't understand. And even though I tried my best to hold the evening together, the cracks were already showing, quiet, sharp, and impossible to ignore. When the meal finally arrived, I tried to take it as a small sign of hope. Maybe now he would relax a little. Maybe we could talk like we used to, even if just for a moment. But Daniel didn't touch his food. He didn't comment on it, didn't look at me, didn't show the slightest interest in anything happening at the table. He sat stiff, distant, and trapped inside some decision he had clearly made long before dinner began. I picked up my fork and tried to break the silence. I asked if he wanted to try the dish he used to like. He didn't even lift his head. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it right in front of me. The way he slid it across the table felt cold and final, like he had practiced it. At first, I thought maybe it was an anniversary letter or something sentimental. I even felt a small spark of hope for half a second. But when he leaned back and folded his arms, I knew it wasn't anything good. His eyes didn't soften. His expression didn't change. He just waited for me to open it. I slowly lifted the flap, and the moment I saw the legal seal and the long stack of typed pages, my stomach tightened. I looked up at him, confused, hoping I was mistaken. But Daniel didn't hesitate. In a flat, emotionless voice, he said he wanted a divorce. He said he wanted it to happen fast, effective immediately. And he wanted me to sign the papers tonight. The words didn't make sense at first. I just stared at him, trying to understand how a man could say something so heavy with such emptiness. My mind searched for a reason, an explanation, a fight we never had, a moment I somehow missed. But he gave me nothing. He didn't offer a single memory, a single feeling, or a single ounce of kindness. He just told me to sign. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. The restaurant suddenly felt too bright, too loud, too close. There were people at nearby tables, eating, laughing, living their lives, and here I was being handed the end of my marriage like it was a bill to pay. I felt humiliation settle in my chest, heavy and sharp. I couldn't imagine why he would choose this place, this night, this moment to destroy everything we had built. I asked him why, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't give a clear answer. He didn't offer a conversation. He simply repeated that he wanted it done, that dragging it out would be useless, and that it was better for both of us to end things now. As if he was doing me a favor. I held the papers with shaking hands. I could feel tears pressing against the edges of my eyes, but I forced them back. I wasn't going to cry in front of strangers. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. But inside, everything felt like it was collapsing. The food in front of me grew cold. My appetite disappeared completely. All I could think about was the envelope, the way he pushed it toward me, the way he didn't care about the cruelty of the moment. He didn't care that this was our anniversary. He didn't care that I had hoped for a night of healing, not breaking. I sat there frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, trapped between disbelief and heartbreak. And even though I didn't fully understand it yet, this wasn't just the end of a dinner. It was the beginning of a truth that would hurt far more than the papers he wanted me to sign. When we left the restaurant, Daniel walked ahead like he didn't care whether I was behind him or not. The ride home was painfully quiet. I kept waiting for him to say something real, something human, something that showed he understood the weight of what he had done. But he drove with the same cold expression, his eyes fixed on the road as if I wasn't even there. When we reached the house, I finally asked him how long he had been feeling this way. He didn't hesitate. He didn't think. He didn't even blink. He just said he had fallen out of love years ago. The words felt flat, almost rehearsed, like he had practiced them enough times to make sure he wouldn't shake while saying them. Something about his tone made the whole thing feel wrong. There was no sadness, no conflict, no emotion at all. It was like he was reading from a script. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think maybe this was truly how he felt. But the calmness in his voice didn't match the life we had lived, the moments we'd shared, the years we had built together. People don't lose love quietly for years without leaving signs. Yet he spoke as if this had been settled, as if he had decided a long time ago and was only now choosing to inform me. He went upstairs while I stood in the hallway, still holding the envelope with the divorce papers. My hands felt numb. My chest felt tight. I kept replaying the night in my mind, searching for something that made sense, but everything felt blurry and sudden. I was trying to breathe through the shock when I heard his footsteps moving around in our bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard him talking softly. At first, I thought he was just pacing, maybe making a work call. But his tone wasn't professional. It was careful. Too careful. I walked quietly toward the stairs, stopping halfway up. I wasn't trying to spy. I just wanted to know what was happening. That's when I heard his voice clearly. "It's done," he whispered. "She'll be out by next week." I froze. The words hit me harder than the divorce papers. He wasn't sad. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't even thinking about the damage he had caused. He was giving someone an update, someone who was clearly part of this decision. My whole body felt cold. The divorce wasn't sudden. It wasn't a moment of frustration or a change of heart. It was planned. Carefully, quietly, and cruelly planned. He had chosen our anniversary not by accident, but because it made things easier for him. Maybe it gave him an excuse. Maybe it gave him control. Maybe it was simply the date he had promised someone else. I backed away from the stairs slowly, terrified he would hear me. My mind raced, trying to understand who he had called, how long this had been going on, and what he meant by next week. I had no answers, but I knew enough. Daniel wasn't ending the marriage because he wanted a fresh start or because he was unhappy. He was ending it because he had already made room for someone else. And now he was trying to clear space by pushing me out of the life I had helped him build. The next morning, Daniel acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He drank his coffee, checked his watch, and left for work without looking at me for more than a second. There was no apology, no explanation, not even a sign that he understood the damage he had caused. It felt like I was already erased from his life. His coldness made everything inside me feel heavier, but it also made something else start to form, a quiet awareness that I needed to protect myself. Since he had made it clear he wanted me out by next week, I decided to start packing a few things. I didn't want him to see me cry again, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I tried to stay calm as I gathered my clothes and personal items, but each folded piece reminded me of the years I had spent building a home with a man who no longer cared. At one point, I needed a box, and I remembered there were some stored in Daniel's office. I rarely went in there. He liked to keep it private, and I respected that. But today, I needed a place to put my things, so I stepped inside. The room smelled the same, his cologne, his papers, the faint scent of wood polish. I moved toward the cabinet where he kept extra supplies. As I reached for the boxes, a folder on the edge of his desk slipped and fell to the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. I knelt down to pick them up, expecting invoices or bills. But the first page stopped me cold. It was a bank transfer. Large amounts of money sent to a woman named Rebecca Hayes. At first, I didn't recognize the name, but the more I looked through the papers, the clearer the truth became. There were hotel invoices with 2 guests listed. There were dinner reservations. There were weekend trips booked under his account. And then, buried under everything, I found something even worse, a property deed. Daniel had purchased a small house on the outskirts of town, and the co-owner listed was Rebecca Hayes. I sat on the floor, the papers trembling in my hands. I tried to breathe, but my chest tightened with every new detail I uncovered. He hadn't just fallen out of love. He hadn't been confused or lost. He had built an entirely separate life with someone else. Someone young, someone he worked with, someone he clearly planned to replace me with. The worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't the hotel stays or the new house. It was the date on the deed, 3 months ago. He had bought a home with her while sleeping next to me every night, pretending nothing was wrong. He had smiled at me during breakfast, discussed bills with me, asked me about my day, while planning a future with another woman. My hands shook as I put the papers back on his desk. The truth was right in front of me now. His late nights, his cold behavior, the phone call I overheard, it was all connected. He wasn't simply ending our marriage. He was clearing me out to bring her in. Rebecca wasn't just another woman, she was his plan. And I realized something even darker. He didn't expect me to fight back. In his mind, I was already gone, a quiet, obedient wife who would leave without asking questions. But as I walked out of his office, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed or silent. I wasn't going to let him erase me from the life I had helped build. He thought he had everything under control. He had no idea what was coming. I spent the rest of the day moving through the house like a ghost. Every room felt different now, every memory touched by the betrayal I had discovered. I kept seeing Rebecca's name on those papers, kept imagining Daniel signing documents that tied him to her while using the same hand he held mine with for decades. My heart felt cracked open, but my mind was sharper than it had been in a long time. For hours, I debated confronting him, screaming at him, demanding answers. But each time I imagined his cold face and empty responses, I knew it would be useless. He had already chosen his side. He had already replaced me. Nothing I said would change that. And then I remembered something my father used to tell me when I was younger. Never walk away from a battlefield empty-handed. Those words echoed in my mind with a new kind of strength. I wiped my tears, took a breath, and decided I wasn't going to let Daniel control the end of this marriage the way he had tried to control everything else. If he wanted to end it, fine, but I wasn't leaving without the truth and without what I rightfully deserved. There was too much at stake to just hand him my life and walk out quietly. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell Daniel where I was going. I didn't tell anyone. I simply drove there with the folder of documents I had found and the divorce papers he shoved in front of me. My hands were trembling when I placed everything on the lawyer's desk, but my voice stayed steady. He read through the documents slowly, page by page, and the deeper he went, the more his expression changed. At first, he looked confused. Then he looked troubled. And finally, he leaned back and took a long breath before telling me something that made my whole body go cold. Some of the financial records showed my signature on documents I had never seen in my life. Large transfers, loan agreements, and authorizations linked to Daniel's business dealings, all with my name signed neatly at the bottom. Except it wasn't my writing. The lawyer said plainly what I had been too shocked to consider. Daniel had forged my signature multiple times. The room felt like it was spinning. Betrayal was one thing. Infidelity was another. But this was a crime. Not only had he cheated on me, but he had also used my name, my identity, and my trust to move money around behind my back. If anything had gone wrong, I would have been responsible. I would have been blamed. My lawyer explained that forging a spouse's signature for financial gain was considered fraud, and depending on the amount, it could open a much larger case against him. He told me I had more power than I realized. The evidence Daniel had carelessly left behind, bank transfers, documents, receipts, weren't just signs of his affair. They were proof of illegal activity. I sat there quietly, letting the truth sink in. For years, I had thought Daniel was simply distant or stressed. I had blamed myself for not being enough, for not keeping the marriage alive. But now I could see what had really been happening. He wasn't pulling away because he didn't love me anymore. He was pulling away because he had been busy creating a different life, one that he funded with lies and forged documents. When I left the lawyer's office, I felt different. Still heartbroken, still wounded, but no longer broken. Daniel thought he had everything under control. He thought he could push me out while keeping his secrets safe. But now I had something he never expected, the truth and the power to use it. Over the next few days, I moved carefully, almost silently, through the house. Daniel didn't pay much attention to me. In his mind, I was already out of the picture. He walked around with the confidence of a man who believed he had won, who believed he had everything under control. He came home late, took phone calls in the other room, and avoided any real conversation with me. Each time he looked at me, it was with a cold certainty, like he was just waiting for the moment I finally gave up and walked out. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was preparing. My lawyer told me exactly what I needed to collect: proof of the forged signatures, copies of the bank transfers, evidence of the property he purchased with Rebecca, and any financial documents that showed my name being used without my knowledge. So, while Daniel went about his routine, I quietly worked in the background. I returned to his office when he wasn't home, but this time I wasn't shaking or emotional. I was focused. I took photos of every document that carried my signature. I made copies of the hotel invoices and property papers. I recorded the dates, amounts, and account numbers. Every detail mattered. My lawyer said the more organized the evidence, the stronger the case would be, and I wanted the strongest case possible. When I found a hidden file inside his desk drawer, it confirmed everything I already knew. It held records of transactions to an account I had never seen before. The account was in his name and Rebecca's. They had been building a life together financially long before he had the courage to hand me divorce papers. Seeing their names side by side stung, but I didn't let my emotions take over. I scanned each document quickly, making sure I didn't leave anything out of place. At home, I acted calm and quiet, careful not to draw attention. Daniel believed I was heartbroken and confused. He mistook my silence for weakness, and that made him careless. He never imagined I was collecting the truth piece by piece. He never imagined I had already consulted a lawyer. He never imagined I was planning to turn everything he had done back onto him. One evening, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. But the message that lit up the screen told me everything. Is she gone yet? The name attached to it was Rebecca. I didn't feel anger this time. I felt clarity. She wasn't just part of his betrayal. She was part of the plan to remove me. Daniel stepped out of the bathroom a few minutes later, completely unaware of what I had seen. He looked at me with the usual coldness, as if he was already imagining life without me. I met his eyes, but I didn't let him see anything. Not the hurt. Not the anger. Not the plan building inside my mind. In the days that followed, I gathered everything my lawyer needed. Every signature Daniel had forged. Every hidden account. Every receipt that connected him to Rebecca. Every proof of the property they purchased behind my back. I placed them all in a neat folder, ready to hand over. Daniel kept living in his illusion. He walked through the house as if he owned every inch of it. He made plans with Rebecca behind my back. He talked with confidence, acting as though he had already won. But what he didn't know was that I had enough evidence to destroy everything he was trying to build. He didn't know I had legal grounds to turn his betrayal into consequences that would change his life. He didn't know I wasn't leaving empty-handed. And he definitely didn't know that the woman he thought was finished was preparing a counterattack he never saw coming. Laura felt a strange calm inside her when Daniel tried to push her out of the house again. He spoke with the same cold voice, acting as if she had no place there anymore. But this time she wasn't scared, and she wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was about to do. She reached into her bag and pulled out the envelope her lawyer had prepared. When she handed it to him, she watched his confidence shift in an instant. He opened it casually at first, but the moment his eyes reached the first page, his face changed completely. The color left his skin, and he looked as if the ground had disappeared under his feet. He finally understood she wasn't helpless. She wasn't begging or broken. She was fighting back in the only way he didn't expect, the legal way. The notice explained that she wasn't accepting the divorce he tried to force on her. Instead, she was filing a case that would freeze every account in his name, stop his access to his money, and open an investigation into the fraud he committed using her signature. Everything he thought was hidden was now out in the open. All the transfers, the false documents, the property he bought behind her back. Every single thing was included in the file. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His hands shook as he read the rest of the notice. For the first time, he wasn't the one in control. He wasn't making the decisions. He wasn't winning. Laura stood there watching him struggle for air, and she didn't feel guilty for a second. She had given him years of loyalty, trust, and support, and he had repaid her with betrayal and cruelty. Now he had to face the consequences. Rebecca, who had been waiting outside in her car, walked in just as he dropped the papers on the table. She picked them up and scanned through a few lines. Her reaction was almost immediate. She stepped away from him as if he were dangerous. She didn't want to be part of any scandal, any fraud, or any legal case that could ruin her future. The moment she realized he wasn't a wealthy, powerful man anymore, but someone on the edge of being exposed, she let go of him completely. She didn't argue, didn't defend him, didn't even look at him with sympathy. She simply walked away. Daniel turned toward Laura, desperate and confused, but she didn't move. She didn't raise her voice or try to explain anything. She just told him calmly that everything he did would now be handled by the court. There was no more manipulation, no more threats, and no more lies. The truth had finally caught up with him, and the life he tried to build by destroying hers was falling apart right in front of him. Laura walked out of the room knowing this was the beginning of his downfall, and the beginning of her own strength returning. Daniel's downfall did not take long to arrive. Once the investigation began, his company quickly learned about the forged documents, the hidden accounts, and the fraud linked to his name. They didn't stand beside him or give him a chance to explain. He was removed from his position almost immediately. The man who once acted as if he controlled everything suddenly had nothing to hold on to. The power he used to show off was gone, and the respect he used to get disappeared overnight. When Rebecca heard about his job loss and the seriousness of the case, she made her decision even faster. She didn't want to be tied to someone facing legal trouble. She didn't want her name linked to fraud, scandal, or a man who couldn't even protect himself. She cut all contact with him quietly, without a message or a final conversation. She walked away as if their relationship never existed. Daniel tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He had built his new life around her, hoping she would replace the wife he betrayed, but she wasn't willing to stay in a sinking ship. With the court freezing his accounts and the company taking action, Daniel couldn't maintain the lifestyle he once showed off. He was forced to move out of the house he tried to take from Laura. The home now legally belonged to her alone, and the court made that clear. He packed his things in silence, without the same arrogance he used against her. For the first time, he had to face the reality he had created with his own actions. Laura received full ownership of the house as part of the settlement. She also received a financial compensation that would help her rebuild her life without struggle. More importantly, her name was cleared. The investigation confirmed she had no role in the fraud and that her signature had been used without permission. Her reputation, which Daniel tried to ruin, was restored completely. Friends, neighbors, and even people who believed his lies before now understood the truth. The biggest change, however, was inside her. For years she had lived with fear, confusion, and emotional pain. She had been blamed for things she never did, pushed aside from her own home, and made to feel small by someone she trusted. But as she stood in her peaceful living room, now truly her own, she felt something she had almost forgotten: calm. There was no shouting, no threats, no walking on eggshells. The house felt lighter, and so did her heart. She was finally free from the weight he had placed on her. She had her future back. She had her dignity back. She had her peace back. And this time, she knew she would never let anyone take it away from her again. Months passed, and the chaos of the divorce faded into quiet days. Laura spent her mornings in the sunlight streaming through her living room, thinking about everything that had happened. The pain of betrayal was still there, a faint ache beneath her ribs, but it no longer controlled her. Each memory of Daniel's lies and the life he had built with Rebecca reminded her not of weakness, but of survival. She had endured the worst and come out on the other side stronger. She decided it was time to focus on herself. Laura had always loved design, a hobby she had kept tucked away while raising a family and managing her marriage. With the settlement money and the peace she had won, she started a small interior design business from home. The first projects were simple, helping friends redecorate a room or advising on furniture layouts, but with each completed job, her confidence grew. Clients began referring others, impressed not just by her taste but by her calm professionalism. She realized she could create beauty out of chaos, both in homes and in her own life. Laura also reconnected with friends she had drifted away from over the years. She invited them over, shared laughter and meals, and allowed herself to enjoy simple moments again. These connections reminded her that love and trust still existed in her world, even if Daniel had tried to take it all away. She leaned on people who truly cared, and in return, she gave herself permission to be happy again. Occasionally, Daniel reached out. He called, left messages, and even sent a brief note apologizing. Laura read his words once, then placed them aside. She didn't respond. She didn't feel anger because anger is heavy and exhausting. What she felt was clarity. The truth had already exposed him. His actions had consequences, and she didn't need to punish him herself. Walking away from his attempts to re-enter her life was more powerful than any argument or confrontation could ever be. Laura reflected on everything she had learned about herself. She discovered she was resilient in ways she had never imagined. She could handle betrayal without losing herself. She could face deceit without becoming bitter. She could rebuild her life from pain into something meaningful, beautiful, and lasting. The trust she had placed in herself became her guiding light, stronger than any fear or hurt inflicted by someone else. By the time summer arrived, Laura's house was filled with color, warmth, and life again. Her small business was growing steadily, and her friendships brought her laughter and companionship she hadn't felt in years. She had learned that revenge didn't need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was simply the quiet assertion of truth and the decision to move forward with dignity. Daniel's betrayal had shaken her to the core, but in the end, It had also rebuilt her into someone wiser, stronger, and more self-assured than she had ever been. And for the first time in a long time, she felt completely free.